Hey, everybody, this is another episode of Rob Byrd's All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast. You may wonder why I am posting episodes of Rob's podcast on my channels. And the reason is because he has asked me to be a part of his panel as the kind of religion/faith contributor. And so I get to be a regular part of his panel, and I love it. I'm enjoying this project. And Rob has so graciously allowed me to use those episodes to post on my own channels since I'm in the podcast. I think it's a great project to be a part of, and some really powerful information and ideas and thoughts to share with my audience. So I hope you enjoy these episodes. If you want to know more about Rob's work and the things that he's doing, you can go to tabootalkback.com. I'm going to have the information in the show notes. You can follow us there. And you may also notice, if you're watching on YouTube, that after this intro video, there's no video. It's just a static image. There's nothing wrong with your screen. That's just because his podcasts are being recorded currently in audio format only. So we've put a image up there as a placeholder. But of course, you can get all the same content simply by putting in your earbuds and listening along. Of course, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, it's going to listen just like a normal audio podcast. So I really hope you enjoy. This is episode 6 of All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast with Rob Byrd. And also in the audience or in the panel today is Amanda. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast. This podcast will explore all the subjects that make the insecure squirm in their seats. Religion, politics, local and national, the Constitution of the United States, the wheel of love and hate, and mental illness, to just name a few. Stay with us as we use our freedom of speech to delve into the good and the bad. If this podcast is not for you, feel free to find another one. Without any further ado, here comes all the things they don't want you to talk about. All right, welcome to another episode of All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About. You can find out more about that at tabootalkback.com. Find our other episodes right there and other information, what we'll be talking about with this new podcast. Here in the studio, we got a small panel today. Amanda Jones.
Hello.
Good to see you. Yes. And Mylan Bittenbender is back for round 2 with us. Good day to you, Mylan.
Good day, Rob.
Yeah. And I want to say, I saw your podcast the other day, your introduction to the podcast that we did last week, and I want to say thank you for that right away. It was very nice. I really appreciate the kind words, and hopefully, we're gonna be doing the same for each other and trying to help each other and get these podcasts up and running and see if we can't help some people, because I think we are. And I'm seeing some nice success. When I saw that you had just put it out, I already had like 30-40 views on it. So I thought that was a pretty cool start, and hopefully you get good feedback out of it. And I think we've got some pretty good feedback, and like what we're saying, at least as far as, the lifeguard stuff we're doing, our first one has well over 100 downloads on it.
Good.
And that's pretty darn good. I mean, I did Rob Byrd's Moondog Show for 5.5 years, and I only have a handful of episodes that have reached that number. So people are listening, and they care about what we're doing, and these are the subjects that there are people in this world they don't want us to talk about: religion, mental health, the Constitution of the United States, conspiracy theories, and of course politics. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants you just to shut up and do as you're told and not think for yourself. But that is not at all what this podcast is about. This podcast is about opening your mind, thinking about different things. All we're really trying to do here is ask questions, maybe give some answers, but lead you to a place where you will search a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think that being able to look at life from some different angles and have the option to consider things from different perspectives is super, super important. And we do have a world that's becoming so much more compartmentalized. Yeah. If you believe in this particular way, or you lean this particular way in politics, then your social feed is going to send you certain information. Yeah. And we've really got to have a broader conversation about a lot of these things, so we're not so small-minded.
Yeah. I mean, and that certainly is an issue when you talk about small-mindedness. I think there are people out there, and I guess I'll ask you this question. Do you think everybody is capable of opening their mind, or are there just some people that never will and they can't?
So much that depends on how we were taught growing up or how we've perceived the world. And there's a lot of people who've kind of gotten locked into a certain perspective or a certain group. It's funny, we've been talking about the Enneagram.
Right,
a lot of it has to do with our personality style, the style that we chose, the kind of coping mechanisms or the strategy that we chose to deal with the world around us. And for a lot of people, I think they feel very overwhelmed by society. They feel overwhelmed by all the different voices. So they find one that resonates in a certain moment, in a certain space, and they lock in, and then they just kind of allow that to become their world when the world is so much bigger.
Okay.
That's very true.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw out the whole nature versus nurture debate, because when we look at the Enneagram and it kind of classifies people in their characteristics and who they are. Now, do you think that when you're born, you're locked into something, or do you think it's a matter of environment? Nature versus nurture. Do you become who you are because how you were raised, or you to become who you are because you were born with certain genetics and this is where you're going to go?
Yes.
Both.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely both. We're going to talk a little bit about the Bible today, right?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, we may be back in Genesis.
Yes. The beginning.
Probably my favorite. I can't say my favorite. I have too many favorites. But the thing that I love about Genesis is it really gives us a look at how we were created, why we are the way that we are. And the fact is that we were created in God's image, but everyone unique. So I think we come into the world with certain propensities, and then all of these different factors. And I think one of the beautiful things about the way that God created us is he created us with a freedom to grow and become. We are not so predetermined.
Yeah. His gift to us was free will.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a testament to love.
Yeah.
Especially when you know that creation with the free will is going to turn around and slap you in the face.
And then, of course, we live in the United States of America, where there are other countries that even God gave them free will. They don't have it. We are given free will, and we have it. We're able to do those things, to pursue what we want to pursue. So this country is a country that allows everybody to be who they are. Not everybody accepts everybody. That's a lot of the issues, but you still have the right to be who you are and not be persecuted, not necessarily by other people, but not by the government.
Absolutely. And we better protect that.
Yes. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we talk about the Bible and talk about the beginning. I think a little bit, we'll do some another episode later on the Enneagram and talk a little bit more about those characteristics of what categories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What does it go up to?
9.
Go up to 9. So there's 9. What they're saying with it, then there's 9 characteristics of people. Although some of them kind of cross over a little bit. And
there's 9 main types.
Yes.
3 subtypes within each one. So they say kind of 27 main types. But then, it's just like anything else. You can take music, you can take, 7 notes of music?
Yes.
And you mix them up and you can create an unlimited number of melodies and songs and things like that. And in the same way, you take these 9 personality types and you mix in a lot of other features and you get this amazing array of beautiful people.
Okay. Well, what I would say to those out there that may be listening is do your homework on it, get a little knowledge on what the Enneagram is, and then here a little ways down the line, we'll dig a little deeper into that. But Genesis. Yeah. What I remember, and I'm going to start you here. From what I remember of Genesis is this line. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Take it from there.
Yeah, the heavens and the earth. Now I'm just gonna tell you, Rob, I'm not as educated as many in this area. So I'll tell you, and I'll tell all the listeners, a lot of this is this is what I've perceived. I don't want anybody to take this as this is, the word of the Lord, my interpretations.
And that's with everything that we do. We're talking about our lived experiences, some things that we know are facts, and some things that we're still exploring as facts, or trying to find out if it's factual or not.
And exploring is a great way to say that, because, even with this concept, I think the heavens and the earth, to me, I think of the heavens and the earth, I think of two different realms. I think the heavens refers to not just space somewhere out there,
Right.
but I think the spiritual realm. In the beginning, God created. There's the spiritual realm, and then the earth, or the physical realm. And obviously, there's a tremendous amount of dialogue about, did God really create? Is there really a God? And how did all of this come to be?
And where was he originally? Because he had to create the heaven and the earth to be here. Where was he during that time?
Yeah. Physical matter has a beginning and an end, but spiritual components don't.
Yeah.
God is spiritual.
Okay. Now, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That's day one, right?
Actually, that's before day one.
That's before day one. Even before you start day one, he created this, and now we have to start creating the things that fill heavens and the heavens and earth.
Yeah.
What came around on the first day?
Yeah, that was when God said, "Let there be light." Yeah.
Which is something that it's interesting that I think in everybody's life, that's all that what you should be searching for is light, is for enlightenment, a higher understanding of the things that are around you, people, places, the stigmas and the community. When you're in a community, every community is different. Sometimes people refer to the communities about where they live. Sometimes people refer to the community, and maybe that's an LGBT community they're referring to. So there's a lot of different communities, and it's sometimes hard to put your finger on what community someone's talking about when they say community.
Right.
It's weird because we're all Americans.
Yes.
And just we kind of getting away from that.
I still feel patriotic and feel we all are under one flag. And that flag doesn't necessarily represent the United States. It represents God. It represents the people that are here. And it represents trying to do, or what we should be doing, is the right things around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the fact that you indicated a difference when you said light. You didn't refer to the sun. It's interesting that the sun, moon, and stars were not created on the first day.
Right.
Light was created, and darkness, and it says that God separated the light from the darkness. And so we have, a lot of times we think in very physical terms about what all of those things mean. But again, the Bible is being written from a spiritual perspective.
Everything we do, we try to put it in a literal form. Something that we can, because our imaginations are limited.
Right. Yeah, I was listening to a philosopher the other day. I'm actually looking through my phone to remember his name. I'm really embarrassed I can't remember his name because I listen to his stuff all the time.
Oh, welcome to the club.
Yeah. Good reference to my midlife podcast where we begin to deal with some of those senior moments.
Now, when you start forgetting things and how many times have I walked? I can't think how many times I've walked to the garage and I'm standing there. I'm like, what am I in here for? Because as that long walk from the living room to the garage, I thought about something else. So that thought completely gone. Mm-hmm. Goodbye. Never coming back till you're back on the couch saying, that's what I went in there for.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one.
You are not the only one, and she's 10 years younger than us. So we're 13 years younger.
I've been dealing with that though for my whole life. I think it's a part of my personality at this point.
It certainly could be.
So, anyway, this particular philosopher was talking about the difference between darkness and light, and he was saying that a lot of times the atheists accuse Christians or other religious people of being people who need some kind of deity because they're afraid of the dark, and his response was, and some people don't want a deity because they're afraid of the light.
Yeah. Well, the light is much more scary. I mean, you can remain in the dark and just let the world go by, but it's the light that's out there. It's the light that you don't know. That to me, that is scary, and that is kind of what the fun of searching for light is trying to find those real truths, the real truths that you formulate, not necessarily what you're told.
Yeah. Light is about revelation. Think about it. When we walk into a room, the reason we flip on the light is because we need the contents of the room and the layout of the room to be revealed to us so that we don't trip and fall and bust ourselves, and so light brings revelation. Light brings truth. And in every aspect of life, not just walking into a room full of physical objects, but walking into society, walking into relationships, walking into anything. We need truth, and I love the fact that the first thing God does is creates light, and it says even before that, Rob, I want to point this out, and it says, you mentioned that first verse, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now, verse 2 says, now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. That's the darkness that we're talking about. That word there, confusion, chaos, and not just, this, I don't know what's going on kind of confusion, chaos, but like a deep destructive confusion and chaos.
Well, how do you get chaos when there aren't any people yet? Because people on the first day have not been made.
Well, physical matter is not spiritual. God is creating physical matter, and He's created the heavens and the earth. And in the beginning, it was, think about the Big Bang, right? There's a whole lot of theories about. Was the Big Bang simply the voice of God speaking? And what we look back and see as a Big Bang kind of genesis of creation is really the voice of God speaking creation into existence. But think about those first moments of what happened after that catastrophic event. It was absolute explosion, chaos, energy, just everywhere, right? Is that how it was? I don't know.
None of us were there.
We don't know, right? But we look at the Word of God, and if we trust the Word of God, or we listen to the Word of God, or at least give it some room to speak to us, there's some pretty profound truths that are really hard to ignore. But it says, now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And I get this vision that, okay, boom, everything has been kind of spoken into existence. And now God, who is described in the scriptures as holy, altogether separate, apart, different, sees the need to bring order to all of this chaos. And that's what I see the 7 days of creation, the 6 days of creation, and the day of rest really being, is God's work of bringing order to the chaos of the physical universe.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that is certainly interesting, because, like I said, we're not necessarily talking when the words that are in the Bible as figuratively. I mean, we're thinking of literally. How can you imagine it? And like I said, we can't imagine that because our brains don't have that capacity. You can't just think of it. Now you can develop it, when you see large sci-fi like Star Trek. Over those years, it started with this concept and became this huge concept. And it's kind of the same thing.
And I think we have to be humble enough to realize we're probably never going to be able to figure it all out.
Right.
I mean, even gravity, they still don't actually know what it is.
Right.
We've been able to measure it. We've been able to come up with laws that seem to govern it. We've been able to figure it out well enough to use it as a tool to figure out how to, land on the moon and all of that kind of stuff. But we still don't know really actually what it is. And I think there's a lot of mysteries in the universe. We will never be able to figure that out.
Right.
I'm not opposed to us trying. I'm not opposed to us. But what bothers me,
trying is searching for light and searching for answers.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But what bothers me is when people say, "Oh, we do have this figured out, and here is definitively the answer on that." I mean, how many times? Right. Well, throughout history, have the things that have been definitively explained had to be like, "Oh, well, okay, maybe not so much."
Well, let me bring this back to our last 4 or 5 years. It's been the same thing. We seem to be learning a lot of new things, or terms are changing, and it's like, why are we making change and saying things just for the sake of change?
You get a lot of people saying, "Oh, that's old-fashioned thinking," and stuff like that.
But in the same thing is, you don't reinvent the wheel when there's nothing wrong with it. You don't paint the barn when it's just freshly painted. And so why?
Unless you don't like the color of the barn.
True, but we're trying to change things that have been tried and true, and now the things that are getting changed too are not for the masses; it's for the few.
Yeah, yeah. But the few, in order to justify their change, want the masses to accept it and will push it on the masses.
Yeah,
yeah. Because everybody wants this inclusion, but it's not really.
No,
it's not really.
It's exclusive. And like an X, and it doesn't pull in everybody, and you're never going to.
Yeah,
there are so many. Maybe when we talk about the Enneagram, so many different character types that how do you think you're ever going to get them all to come together in this grand utopia that just will never happen? And it can't. Yeah, we want to make things as good as it can be for everybody. But you have to remember, I'll say it a million times, my favorite saying from Spock on Star Trek was the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one.
Yeah.
But we've totally flipped that over, and the rest of us that are the majority are kind of now the minority.
Yeah.
And not because of numbers, but by voices.
Well, because people don't, you can get into the Constitution, your First Amendment rights of free speech. People don't feel like they are really free to say how they feel.
No. Well, you are. Everybody's free to say what you want, but there can be ramifications for it for sure.
Absolutely.
Are you willing to deal with those?
Yeah, there's consequences.
And most people are not. Most people are not willing to stand up and say how they feel because they're scared of being attacked. They don't want to be attacked. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Get attacked because it only makes you stronger.
Spoken by a true 8.
Shown by someone who's been attacked. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I kind of lost my train of thought on it, but
I know I went real deep there. Sorry.
You did. It was so deep I can't get out. No, it's just something that's interesting to think about in this day and age. It's something that's always gone through my head through my adolescence. Everybody just saying, "Well, that's old-fashioned thinking," or "That's the older generation," or "They're just old. You don't need to listen to them." But now that I'm 40 and I'm considered now to the younger, "You're old," which I don't feel old. But I feel like we need to respect the older generations a little more and come together. I think there's all these generational gaps where we don't speak to each other. When I worked at the Legion, I would serve I don't want to say elderly community, but like usually 60 and up, that crowd. And I got a lot of confidence from these men and learning from them and their life experiences. And it changed my views on a few things.
Yeah.
And it kind of always went back to the foundation of how I was raised. And these are people who are out in nature every day, who are flying planes, who are gardening and farming and, just life. And people that are not, I would say, of the world.
Yeah. Well,
and it's refreshing.
It reminds me of one of my favorite sayings from one of the best movie franchises ever made called John Wick. Where there's this line that said, the guy says, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king."
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a great saying, and it goes really deep, and it means a whole lot. So, all right. So now that we are at least trying to be one-eyed men in the land of the blind, what happened on day 2?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we still don't see the sun and stars, the sun, moon, and stars. It says, "Let there be a vault between the waters, separate the water from the water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it.
What's the vault?
God called the vault sky.
The sky.
Now,
okay.
See, there's some real interesting theories on all of this. This is where God begins to separate the water and the land and all of that. That happens on day 2. And, some people who've said, a global flood is impossible. So there's no way that we can trust the Bible and Noah's flood. Noah's flood shows up later in Genesis. That's still in the very beginning, kind of all this human history thing. But there's a lot of theories about what that means, the water above and below the vault being the sky. So this open chasm area, was there some type of canopy of water or was there, there's some theories that the atmospheric pressure was so much higher and there was so much more humidity in the air, almost like, this super dense humid air. If a comet struck, a comet of ice
big enough,
struck the earth, and that ice with the the ash cloud that would have been put up, blocked out the sun and all that kind of stuff. I mean, imagine what would happen to all of that humidity. Plus, it says that the fountains of the deep burst forth, and and so you have the kind of situation that could create a tremendous flood, if not a global flood. So there's a lot of people that still aren't 100% sure about what that means.
Well, I saw a video the other day, and it was actually really good, and it speculated that God sent the flood to kill the giants. Which when you say, well, there were no giants, but then you look back at the story of David and Goliath.
The Nephilim is what they call them.
Yes.
There's reference to that in Genesis 2. Now, Rob, how deep do you want to go here?
Very.
I mean, you love this stuff.
I do.
You? Well, there's a portion of scripture that talks about the sons of God marrying the women of the earth and having sex with them and producing offspring. That
unholy offspring, right?
That were giants. Well, all of us were unholy by that point.
Okay.
Anything after Genesis chapter 3, the fall of mankind, none of us are holy.
Yeah.
But these are demonic beings. Again, a lot of conjecture, we're not sure exactly what that means. But we do have, we have fossilized skeletons from around the world.
Yeah, and why does the Smithsonian say it's not true? They deny it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, a lot of things, if they show up in the Bible, we want to push them off the table as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a lot of things in the Bible that kind of, and I know you love the conspiracy stuff,
right?
Right.
I do.
There's a lot of those conspiracy
most of it's
kind
true.
of things. Yeah, there's an element of truth to it, and we should chase after that and try to figure out what that is. But there's a lot of those kinds of things that the Bible begins to make sense of if we believe and we trust it. Now, that doesn't mean we can just read the Bible and all of a sudden make sense of the world, because there's a lot of things that have changed.
Oh, yeah.
Things that are different now. Again, the water above the vault and below the vault. I believe that the world we live in has changed so much that we don't have enough evidence to really aren't able to nail down what that meant or what that looked like.
Okay.
But we have evidence of different things that have happened throughout history that can give us some clues.
Yeah, and it's tough evidence because it's so old that really when everybody is looking at it, it's still all conjecture.
Yeah,
and you're trying to bring in different opinions from everywhere else. Learned behavior, everything you learned over those time to apply it to what you just learned about finding a giant skull.
Yeah,
I just found I love that you said if it's in the Bible, science tries to push it off the table.
Yeah,
and that has been the case. But there's some things that science is kind of bringing back. Like, okay, well, maybe just maybe that is true. But we run a. I want to say it's one of those things where it's tough because we want everything to be right in front of our eyes. The truth is only something we can see. If you can't see it and it's not there, it's not the truth.
Some of that goes to what we're going to get to in chapter 3 of Genesis, where we see the fall of mankind. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there's the tree of life. And the tree of life, I think, is innocence. It's just this, like a child before their father, doesn't need to know everything, doesn't need to have all of life figured out. I know who does. Daddy takes care of me. And I think Adam and Eve were created to have that kind of relationship, that just innocent, they're just living life with their father in creation. But what was the lure of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? What did the serpent say? Your eyes will be opened, you will be like God, knowing good from evil. I think the real temptation there was, you'll have it all figured out. You don't need him anymore. You can make all your own decisions. You could be the master of your own destiny.
Okay.
And there was an attractiveness in that to be everything that we needed to be all on our own without God. And now we see that that's pretty much, when we talk about being born with a sinful nature, isn't that woven into the heart of every man and woman?
Yeah.
And I hate it.
Yeah.
Because it kicks our tail most of the time.
Yeah.
but we still want to hang on to that. I can be the master of my own destiny.
Yeah. And it brings me kind of that question where you talked about it. And all of a sudden the apple pops into my head. Mm-hmm. And now, is the apple just figurative, or was it to be a physical apple that they weren't supposed to eat? Or was this something that was like, okay, we just asked you not to do it and we equate it to eating an apple?
Yeah, well, the Bible doesn't say it was an apple.
It doesn't?
No.
Why is that?
It's a fruit.
Just any fruit?
A fruit, yep. And an indiscriminate fruit. But there were two fruit-bearing trees in the middle of the garden, all kinds of other fruit-bearing trees, right? But there were two that the Bible specifically talks about. The tree of life, and that was the one, the fruit was taken. As a matter of fact, part of the reason that Adam and Eve were banished from the garden was because God did not want them to have access to the fruit of the tree of life, where they could continue to live forever.
You can live here forever, but don't eat from this tree.
Well, that was the tree of life, yes, but the other tree was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Okay,
and I think, we talked about freedom and the fact that God gave us freedom. You can't have true freedom if there aren't choices. And I believe to some degree God said you could choose this path if you'd like to. The path is there. This path, all your needs are met. Fellowship with God, living in this perfect garden, everything is wonderful, everything is great, but there is this path over here, and it's available. Will you, if you choose to take it?
Yeah.
And of course we know the story that Adam and Eve chose.
The serpent that convinced them to do so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now we're talking about trees, but yet on the second day there weren't trees yet. So we need to get to the third day here, and one of these days he's going to start putting trees on the earth.
No, actually, it says that's part of the second day.
That was part of the second day.
Let the dry ground appear, and it was so. God called the dry ground land, and he gathered the waters called seas. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees." Blah blah blah. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was the third day.
That was the third day.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
So the second day was the vault with the water
and earth.
Yep.
And that was trees, the second day. And then the different vegetation that inhabits the earth is what came on the third day.
Right. Yep. The separation of the land and the water, and then the vegetation.
Okay.
Yep.
So that one's pretty easy. What happened on the fourth?
So on the fourth, let there be lights. So that was the sun, moon, and stars.
That
were created on the fourth day. The two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night.
Yes.
And then the stars.
Yes. And then when we talk about those conspiracy theories, one conspiracy theory is that moon only showed up 14,000 years ago. That it's really not, that it's like a base station. That's going real deep. We'll do that on one of our but it is kind of fits that same thing. So, and they say it only is here for 14,000 years because they go back and look at hieroglyphics, and that 14,000 years ago is where they started showing up about the moon.
Okay. Yeah.
So it kind of strange there. I mean, who's to know? But when we're talking Genesis, how long ago are we talking about right now?
Again, lots of theories. Some would say that the days were time periods. Could have been thousands or even millions of years.
So each day could have been 1,000 years, or it could have been a 24-hour that we know of as a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure where I land on that.
Yeah.
There are plenty of things that I see in the Bible that to me are like, at the end of the day, this doesn't really affect my relationship with God. Whether God created in 24 hours as we know it, or if it was, a million years for a day, that doesn't affect my relationship with God. I still believe that God brought all of this into existence, including me and you, and created us for a relationship with him. And my faith really rests on what I see in the person of Jesus Christ, and, God coming to earth as a man and interjecting himself into this human race. That's where my faith really stands. And the rest of that stuff, someday we'll know.
Right.
Someday.
Those answers will be revealed.
Someday I believe we'll be in a place where we will know exactly. All of those questions will be answered. But until then, I'm fine with a little mystery.
Right. Well, that's what keeps us going.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
So are we on the 5th day now?
Yeah. So the 5th day is all the rest of the animals, the birds, the fish, the birds,
the inhabitants before humans.
Yeah. Yep. And then the 6th day, God created human beings in his own image.
Yeah. Okay. And then on the 7th day was the day of rest.
Yeah.
And which is when you look at the day of rest, when I was a kid and I would be at my grandparents, which they were very, I don't want to go say religious, but they were pretty strict about it.
Yeah.
Sundays where you go to church, you fellowship, you come home and eat dinner. You don't mow the lawn. You don't go out and do stuff in the yard. You don't do all that stuff. That's just the day to do nothing, relax, get yourself ready for the first day of the week again.
Yeah.
But to me, I mean, that certainly has all changed. I mean, Sundays are work days. Sundays, I mean, I'll do work on Sunday. I do like to mow the lawn and do yard work and stuff because to me, it's almost more about that reconnecting with God on that day as opposed to just sitting on the couch and not doing nothing and say, I can't do anything because God said this is the day of rest.
Yeah. Human beings definitely put, religious human beings in particular, definitely made that all a rule. The Sabbath day was intended to be a gift from God to say, this is a gift to replenish your soul,
you worked hard all week.
Body. Yeah, and it is intended to be kept holy, set apart for the purpose of replenishment and reconnection with God, and you know, in order to control the masses, maybe, I don't know, but religious leaders over the years, especially back in Jewish culture, began to put very, very heavy lists of rules on that, what was rest and what wasn't. And I felt a little bit of that too when I was growing up. There was a lot of quote unquote rules around what you do on the Sabbath and don't do.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember those quite well. And you just didn't even. And my grandparents lived in Grand Rapids. And that city, the whole city was kind of that way. On their road, you do not go out and mow the lawn on Sundays. Otherwise, you will be ostracized. And everybody was like, look at that guy out there doing this. And it was a whole lot different than now. It's I don't get how in 45 years that much change can happen.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that.
I think it's just a way of people's thinking. Like, oh, well, that's old fashioned. You can't do that on Sunday.
Yeah.
I want to go to the mall. Because growing up for me, it was we keep the Sabbath day holy. You don't go shopping. You don't go out to restaurants.
No.
You go to church.
It's for family and home.
Have family meals. And we just spent the day as a family. I know that we used to go to the beach. And at one point, they brought that up to my dad saying, oh, you're not keeping the Sabbath day holy. And my dad was like, no, I am. I'm being the patriarch of my family.
Yeah.
Good
and
for
we're
him.
being together.
Yep.
And it's something I still remember.
We don't have to rest at home. We're resting on the beach.
Going to the beach on Sunday nights. And I love that.
And to me, that's being with God. Actually, that's being in nature. That's where he is. And just like everything else, we talked about this last week on the last podcast we did, where God is all around you. God isn't just in the church. He's everywhere you want him to be all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, he is a spiritual being. Again, the heavens and the earth. Jesus spoke of that. He said the kingdom of God is in you. It's among you. It's all around you. It's this idea that it is not a kingdom like the worldly kingdoms we know of, where you could put boundary lines around them and you know where this kingdom starts and the other one ends. Yeah, exactly. But it is it's where the spiritual realm is woven into the fabric of the physical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is all some pretty heady stuff. And, you know, these are the conversations that those that go to church, you don't really get to have. You can't have you can have it one-on-one, and your pastor, your priest, say, hey, I'd like to sit and talk, and you'll have these conversations. But conversations like this with discourse do not happen in church. It's a preacher up in front. He tells you what's up and how it's going. He plays some music. You go home.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's hard to, as a previous pastor, it's hard to preach about these things because you've got all these different individuals in the room. And these are things that are meant to be discussed. I think that's maybe part of what we have a little base in the American church is that it's become so much of a upfront organization, right? There's one or two professionals who stand up front and tell everybody else what they're supposed to believe, and everybody else just kind of like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. When I really believe we're meant to make this a part of, it's a community of people who come together, and I think these kinds of discussions are what God had in mind.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, there's a huge correlation, what I see, to our government and the church. Most people, though, the government, this says this and this, and probably 80% of them just, that's what they say, that must be what it is.
Yeah.
Rather than questioning. And with God and government, I think you almost always have to question everything you hear. Not to say that what's in the Bible isn't true or isn't real, but you have to question it. You have to think deeper about, okay, I heard it. I accept that as face value instead of saying, you know what, I heard that and I've never heard that before. I don't quite get it. Let me see if I can go dig a little deeper and maybe make a more formulated opinion.
You can only believe in something as far as you have explored it and teased it out. And I think that's part of what we see in politics. We see a lot of people who are very shallow, even in their understanding of what is right as far as government and society and things like that. I mean, you've probably seen those interviews on the street where people are questioned about, Palestine. You're shouting from the river to the sea. Which river and which sea?
Yeah.
And people are like, I don't know. Yeah. Have you been caught up in some kind of societal emotional kind of a thing, and you really don't have any idea what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that happens in religion too. People get into an organization, a church, a community of believers, and they like what they feel when they're there, and they maybe like the music, or the pastor or the leader has a certain persona, and they kind of get sucked in. And unfortunately, I saw that a lot, and it was always very frustrating to me. That a lot of people, you'd ask them, what exactly is the gospel? We talk about preaching the gospel. What exactly?
Because I think the younger generations, especially, they're not informed on these types of things.
Well,
they have the ability to be. The
do.
Information is there
It's
in
there.
abundance. But what we don't do is what you were just talking about, Rob. We don't dig it out.
No.
Right.
And I've explained at least to my daughter, because during the school year, they brought up the whole debate, and I actually referred to like scriptures. This has been going on forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, and there's a difference between the Bible and Gospels, correct? Or is it just the same thing? Is it interwoven?
The Gospels are part of the Bible. As a matter of fact, what we would say is that the Bible is the gospel, right? The entire thing from Genesis to Revelation is God's revelation of who he is and his plan for this entire creation, from beginning to, from before the beginning to past the end, if you will. And Jesus is the pinnacle of all of that. So when we refer to the gospel, we're usually referring to the story of Jesus coming to this earth, God among us, Emmanuel, living among us, teaching, ultimately as a humble servant, laying down his life, being the sacrifice, but also being the God-man, being raised back to life and opening the door for us to experience eternal life. So that's kind of the fulcrum point, the bright spot in the whole gospel. But all of the scriptures, that's the beautiful thing, is that all of these scriptures, from beginning to end, point toward that plan of God for his prized creation, those created in his image.
Wow. That's pretty, all right. That's something to think about. And Amanda, I cut you off a second ago. I don't know if you had more that you wanted to say there.
Just with the Palestine stuff, I don't know.
Sure. Well, and
I'm just listening.
And here's how educated so many are when you see some of those. And I'm going to pull the LGBT community in this for a second, where you see a lot of the pride for Palestine kind of stuff. And none of them realize that if they went and did their pride for Palestine in Palestine, they would be executed.
Yeah.
And so they are fighting for a group of people that would just as soon kill them than take their help.
Well, because it's fun to have the argument of, oh, in the 1920s or in the 1940s or in the 1950s. And that's why I kind of explained to my kids, like, this is not what you think. This is almost in these, I hate saying it this way, but it's almost in these people's DNA to just hate each other.
Yeah.
And there's, I don't know. I've been in Iraq and I've been in the Middle East, and it's people are very religious in their religious sects.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we will never understand as Americans.
Right.
And I know somebody who married a Israeli woman, and when they would go to Palestine and go places, they would spit on the ground as she walked past, because that's what they do. Mm-hmm. But he also would say she was kind of a very rude woman to these people too.
Right.
So
it goes both ways.
And this is just within these last few years that this young man lived there, and he's home now. They got divorced, whatever. But these are things that we don't understand as Americans, and so that's why I told my daughter, especially, I don't want her to pick a side, because I can see faults in both sides.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like this is a war that me personally I have any part of.
Not many people
And I know
here.
that it's important. I know it's important.
Well,
but to be screaming at places and destroying monuments and all of this nonsense is not going to help bring peace. Mm-hmm. It's having conversations. It's saying, well, they spit on the ground as she walked. Well, she was a major bitch. So where do you go?
Yeah. I watched a documentary. I mean, it's probably been 30 years ago. So, I mean, this is long before what's currently happening. And they were interviewing, they had actually walked with these children from the time these kids lived in the same neighborhood when they were 4, 5, 6 years old. All got along, loved each other, blah, blah, blah. Everything was fine. Yeah. Well, they tracked them another 12, 14 years later. They're mid to late teenagers now, and some were Palestinian and some were Israeli. And the hatred that they had for one another, and it was because they had moved or they had been relocated or whatever, and the culture, the society around them just impressed so deeply this hatred for the other group. And I mean, they talked very graphically about what they would do if they came across this other person from the other side.
Well, they've shown us October 7th
scary.
What they would do.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I just don't think Americans can even have a grasp. There's nowhere even in America that you can explain that, oh, it's kind of like this place. No, it's no, like Chirac, when people would be like, oh, it's Chirac. Like, no, it's not. Like, it's easy to say these things, but you really have no idea because you've not been there.
But we are so inundated with information that we live by sound bites.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
Those people, what they're experiencing and what they feel and who they are has been baked in for decades. I mean, their entire life.
Yes. Generations.
And then we hear a couple of sound bites, one side, one perspective, and we think we've got it figured out.
Yeah.
And boy, I'm going to rise up and make a big deal out of this. And like you said, we don't have a clue, and we never will.
Yeah.
We never will.
And their war has been going on for thousands of years. This just didn't start yesterday.
This goes back to the Bible.
That's right.
Very long.
I can take you back to where that all started and how it all.
I think that will be a great episode at some point to talk about that. But still being in the beginning, here we are.
Yeah.
Let's just skip past Adam and Eve. They ate the wrong fruit. They were asked to leave, and we could never be a part of that again. Mm-hmm. But now that we do have it, we still have our earth. We still have the water. We still have the trees. We still have all the animals. What do we do with that now? Well, where do we go?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to the beginning. When God created Adam and Eve, he gave them one assignment. Take dominion over all of this. See, everything that I've created, take dominion over all of this. Mm-hmm. And that word dominion, we kind of take that and go, oh, cool, I get to make all the decisions. I get to do whatever
I'm the owner, it's mine.
I want, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was always intended that mankind, we would be stewards. We would be the ones who recognized this belongs to God. It is holy because God created it. God created it for us.
Right.
And now he's given us the opportunity to steward this, to take charge of it, right?
Yeah.
To build it, to protect it, to preserve it, to serve it. And and we've got all kinds of mixed ideas about how that works, and I totally understand that. But at the end of the day, I don't get into all of this climate change stuff. To me, a lot of it comes back to, well, quit building your houses on the shoreline. That's what happens.
Yeah.
The world is changing.
My dad always says,
Right?
that God has been creating and destroying this planet for millions of years.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I do believe there's a whole lesson on where to build your house. You build your house on rock, or there's
Versus the
absolutely
sand.
on sand. Yeah. And I'm sure that's another good one to get into at some other point. But, I think that we hit a real nice spot here in this podcast that I would still want to make sure that if everybody that's still listening, they know about your podcast, The Halftime Show, and tell us a little bit more about that and how they can find that.
Yeah, we as human beings, if we live long enough, we all go through this stage where we've lived enough adult life that things begin to catch up with us,
right.
And we all hit some challenges as early as 35 years old. A lot of times between 40 and 50, or in that area. And my podcast is about it's interviewing individuals that are in or have gone through midlife, just about their experience and what we can learn from one another, and just trying to get it right so our third and fourth quarters can be better, and we can end well.
Yeah. Where do you find it?
You can just look it up, Halftime with Mylan Bittenbender on Spotify or Apple Podcast, and then also on YouTube.
On YouTube. All right.
And of course, if you can find me on Facebook, or can we put a link to it?
Absolutely.
In the show notes
It'll be, I'll put a link to it. I put one in for the last one, and we'll make sure that we do that. My plan is here in a couple of weeks to get you on the radio show too, and talk a little bit about the radio show, and promote your podcast and promote what we're doing here, because I think there's a lot of people that can certainly benefit from what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if they don't necessarily benefit, it will at least get them maybe a place to start and say, oh, I never thought about it that way. Maybe I should do a little research. Maybe I should do a little digging.
Yeah.
Yeah, see it's some other people's ideas and perspectives. I think it's always good to find or to listen to other people, because then it does, at least for me, I can find a common ground, at least knowing where somebody else is coming from.
Yeah,
Sure.
Well, it's for me too. It's hard for someone to come and look me in the face and change my mind, but it's happened.
Yep.
And even if you don't change my mind totally, probably you'll say something to me that will have a little nugget in it and say, you know what, I get that, and I'll adapt myself and how I think a little bit to that. So I've had people where I would never listen to a word they said, but then later I'm like, they might be right, or at least have some nugget of truth in there that you can hang your hat on.
It all depends on the angle of our messaging. And I think too many times in this world, we don't have time to love one another. So we'd rather just kind of...
It's easier to hate than it is to love.
Yeah. We find it's easier or more appealing to force our ideas on other people, when I think just good dialogue like this helps us all. I mean, even in these conversations, I'm listening to you guys,
Right.
and I'm learning. And it's a whole lot easier to open my mind to things when we're just having a good, honest conversation.
And on that, I want to say thank you to Amanda Jones. She's been working hard setting this up, and we're working real hard with these podcasts. And of course, say thank you to Mylan Bittenbender, who has come to share some of his knowledge and truth seeking with us, because that's really what we're doing. There's a lot of things that I would say you are way more versed in the Bible than I am. I'm truth seeking. I do believe Amanda is truth seeking also. And I know that so are you, Mylan. That we're just because you've been in the Bible for 40 years doesn't mean you're done. Yeah. There's always more to learn. There's always more to interpret. So it's been awesome having you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
I love this.
Yes.
Fun.
And to all of you out there, you check out our Facebook page, all the things they don't want you to talk about. You can find us on our website also, tabootalkback.com. And check out Mylan on his halftime show, because it's good stuff, and there's some pretty interesting people that are on that show for sure. So until next time, this is All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About. We'll talk to you later. All the Things They Don't Want You to Talk About podcast is part of the Rob Byrd Moondog Podcast Network. Go to tabootalkback.com for more information. Copyright 2024.